It began where two rivers joined in Central California, the American and the Sacramento. And it became known as the City of the Plain, Sacramento City. And history happened here. The city grew, and as time moved on, the old section by the river faded, began a downward slide toward oblivion, became Skid Row, became a derelict. But before it was finally lost forever, the town decided to save the old section, to restore it. And so the bars and flop houses and cafes were closed, and only a few pigeons and cats remained in residence. At 2nd and J Street stood a building indistinguishable from the rest, an abandoned flop house that had been a focal point of history. It stands, quiet, empty of life and dreams, faded words above a window, Supreme Court rooms. A forgotten pile of cracked and dirty plastered over brick and wood, peeling paint everywhere, its numberless coats of different colors and times curl and drop, noting the passage of years like rings in a dead tree. Once, its windows sparkled with morning sun. The illuminated days now recorded in history books. They reflected passing history on a dusty street below. They caught and they echoed the journey of Concord Coach and Pony Express. 100 years later, its past was mentioned only in books. Now the windows hang broken and grimed, making even sunlight dim through painted letters announcing beds 15 and 25 cents. Where history and a government had been shaped is only the dark, sour smell of decay. In rooms that held the bright, fresh spirit of a new state, silence. Pigeons roost in one room where a man dreamed and then built a railroad. In another, a discarded bottle with no promise, empty of hopes and dreams and wine. How do you begin? Where? Where do you dig through the damp rubble of time to find our past of vital golden days that became a state's history? And then, finding it, reassemble it foot by foot and brick and stone and board, in an attempt to recapture that elusive era of our beginnings, a time that could exist only once. On June 16th, 1967, the B.F. Hastings building and property were purchased by the state of California for restoration. The job began. Very special craftspeople had to be found that could do restoration work that is the culmination of years of study and research by the Department of Parks and its interpretive planning unit. One of their historians said, "No one knows better than any serious researcher the long, lonely, and oftentimes frustrating hours which must be spent to produce a restoration such as this. It is people, the long, lonely hours, and the months and years of patient effort and dedication by people who dig, who research and question and gradually piece together with infinite care our past, our relevance in history's order. This restoration is a celebration to our past and to our present for the future. It is an accomplishment of historians, librarians, archaeologists, architects, designers, artists, secretaries, citizens, laborers, the people who make it happen. For this single building that had become a doomed derelict in old Sacramento had a past as significant as the gold rush itself. Benjamin F. Hastings, a banker, bought the property and the building that was under construction at the corner of 2nd and J Streets in 1853. He established a bank and leased space in the remainder of the building. At the beginning of 1854, Wells Fargo and Company moved into the last remaining space on the first floor of the Hastings building. Their address was number 42nd Street, and they were engaged in the express and banking business. Wells Fargo had been in existence for just under a year and a half when they moved their Sacramento office to the Hastings building. It is generally accepted that shipping conditions were a major handicap in the development of the country. Stages and freight wagons literally clogged the few poor roads which led from Sacramento's Embarcadero to the bustling gold camps in the Sierras. Winter rains turned the wheel tracks into muddy quagmires. In the Sierra, the snow was impassable, and during the blistering summers, the heat and dust were almost unbearable. The first successful effort to substitute the railroad for horse-drawn wagons was the Sacramento Valley Railroad. Incorporated in 1852, the road was planned to connect Sacramento with Marysville through Folsom. Later extensions of the line were envisioned northward to the Shasta country and south to Stockton and San Francisco. The founders of the railroad looked eastward for a construction engineer. The president of the new railroad brought west the brilliant young Theodore D. Judah. Judah had established his reputation as an engineer in the construction of the Niagara Gorge Railroad. When Judah arrived in Sacramento, he immediately began the preliminary planning of grades and routes for the railroad. He established his office on the 2nd floor of the B.F. Hastings building, where he would remain until shortly before construction on the road began in February of 1855. In February 1856, almost 1 year to the day after construction began, California's first railroad from Sacramento to Folsom was formally opened. The shipping time from Sacramento to the mines had been reduced by a full day. But more importantly, Judah had a vision, and he, more than any other, is responsible for the creation of a practical railroad route across the Sierra Nevada mountains. Judah's dream was fulfilled at a lonely spot in Utah called Promontory, when a spike of Sierra gold finally bound California to the Union with the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. In those first days, our isolated, young, lonely, and homesick population felt a desperate need to talk to the folks back in the States. California might as well have been a million miles from New York or Iowa or wherever the restless gold seekers called home. That need was met as best they could through companies such as Wells Fargo, the Pony Express, and the Alta and California State Telegraph Companies. Each of these made its special contribution in binding California to the nation by providing communication that was vital to the internal growth within the state. And all of them had residence within the B.F. Hastings building. For almost half of its corporate existence, the Alta Telegraph Company had its office here. The Alta began its operation in the Hastings building in 1858 and remained there until it was absorbed by the California State Telegraph Company. After the consolidation of the two companies, the California State Line continued to occupy the number 40 2nd Street address until 1863. It was part of the Transcontinental Telegraph when that was completed in 1861. Telegraphy was a fairly recent invention when it made its appearance in California. Public reaction to the telegraph was mystification. When the first regular telegraph office was opened, spectators saw operator Gamble place a message received from San Francisco in an envelope. They thought he was preparing a message for transmission, so as he began working the telegraph key, hiding the dispatch under the table, they all ran out to see the envelope pass along the wire. When it failed to appear, they assumed the wire was hollow, and that the envelope with its message enclosed was forced through the hollow part to its destination. When shown this wasn't so, their final conclusion was that it was an enchained spirit over which Gamble had such control, but whether a good one or an evil one, they could not determine. Both the Alta California and the California State Telegraph Companies were agents for the Pony Express during the time they had offices in the Hastings building. The Alta was agent from April to July of 1860. California State absorbed the Alta in that month and continued as agent until 1861. On the afternoon of April 3rd, 1860, San Francisco gave the first Pony Express a rousing send-off. It is doubtful that the endurance of horse and rider were too heavily taxed on the first leg of the journey. After mounting his steed from the wrong side, this first hero set out from the Alta Telegraph office on Montgomery Street and managed to make it to the waterfront. The rest of the trip to Sacramento was by river steamer. The next leg of the journey departed from Sacramento at about 2:30 a.m., a time not calculated to inspire wild celebration. In the early days, when the gold fever stampeded thousands of strong individuals into our borders, we needed the stability of a legal system to prevent chaos and anarchy. The ultimate legal authority of the state, the Supreme Court, conducted its business on the second floor of this building for 3 years, 1855 to 57. And after a 2-year interim, again sat in regular and special session from 1859 to 1869. Thus, for 13 of the first critical years of our existence as a state, the B.F. Hastings building was the place where basic decisions were made which affect the quality of life in California to this very day. With carefully researched antiques, Park's interpretive historians have completely furnished the Supreme Court room, law offices, and a judge's chamber on the second floor. On the ground floor, they have designed and installed a complete museum on early communications in the 1800s. On the corner of the Hastings building, the bank with the complete confidence of the Californians has come home. Wells Fargo is once again in residence at 2nd and J Streets. It is a modern working bank, but has been furnished and decorated as a bank in the Gold Rush period. A visitor center on the ground floor has paintings of both Mr. and Mrs. Hastings. As was a style of the period, research showed that large signs graced the exterior of the building for both Wells Fargo and the Supreme Court. And the courtroom, as it was described in detail in early newspaper accounts and sketches, is finally completed and stands once again in a splendor that was rare in a gold rush town. Opening day is bright with spring and flags and banjo music. J Street is blocked from traffic for crowds and speeches by dignitaries. In the restored courtroom on the second floor, the California State Supreme Court meets symbolically to christen the new building and to salute their past history of guiding the laws of this western state. A telegraph message is sent directly to the President of the United States, Washington, D.C., as a message was sent in 1861, when the first Supreme Court met here and telegraphed a message to President Abraham Lincoln pledging California's loyalty to the Union. At the fringes of the celebration are some of the park's people who worked on it all from the beginning. The people who made it happen. The people who made it a reality today. Caught in the final rush before the opening day of the Hastings, working long hours, checking on the details of the completed rooms, one of the park historians said, "Sometimes you just get tired. I've been working long days and weekends to be sure everything's as right as we can get it. We all have. But when you sit a minute and look around, it makes you feel good. Because this is ours, our history. This is real, and it's different than just reading about it. We've saved an important part of our past, saved it before it was completely lost. And you know, that's really something worth doing. And now the tourists will come, the citizens. Even one who had slept in the Supreme Court rooms, thinking about how things change. children will come too, to see their history, to touch their past. For better than books alone, this is real, and it can be touched.